riff is growing on me. I don't know about anybody else, but that riff is growing on me. So, good evening.
That's pretty good.
Welcome to the Privy Council. You'll see a whole full continent of the council members today, including some relatively new faces. We got Blaine to come over and talk to us tonight about domestic and other issues. We always value his input at CFC, but now we have it on Wednesday evening, which is wonderful. And Don's in the house. Good to see Don.
Indeed, I've failed to die and returned to the internet once again.
Don is sweating out the fact that there's a tornado 100 miles away from him. So that
Indeed.
gives you a little insight as to what's going on in Don's world. And
well, that and it's 102.
Mike Bennett is in the house, and the graph of South Dakota is in the house. Graph, you want to say hello? Because not everybody knows who you are, because we haven't quite publicized that yet. Go, Graph.
He said something about electrical storms fading in and out. So,
okay, all right. Well, I'll leave that alone. And our resident cross-dresser for Pride Month is in the house as well. Queen Victoria is here in all her splendor, and we're happy to have the Queen. God save the Queen. Come on, man.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to start quoting Freddie Mercury for you, but it's okay.
Well, it's actually Joe Biden, although, as you know, the Queen's been dead for a little while. So, anyhow, what's new and you are the only resident we have in the greater D.C. area. So, how goes it in our nation's capital?
It's still dysfunctional.
Yeah.
And I think we'll have a little chat about that today.
Are you going to find any money in this sort of open book audit that we're doing on the DOD? Or, because you keep what you kill, is what I remember.
Yeah, I know. I don't touch that world.
Okay.
There are too many people streaming around that trough for my tastes.
I think the most important takeaway I had on the $6.2 billion quote accounting error unquote was the fact that it didn't occur to anybody at the Treasury, at DOD, at the Congressional Budget Office, at the White House, to say, "Hey, that's great. Send it back to Treasury and let's pay down some debt." No.
They're funny.
Like that's ever going to happen.
Yeah, I'm just saying. I know if I found the equivalent of in my world of that kind of money, the first thing I wouldn't do is say, "Hey, honey, here, go have a good time with it." That's just not rational thinking at all. So,
no.
All right, I let's get started. We got a fair amount of ground to cover, and I want to get everybody's input on the topics. The topics tonight are we're gonna lead off with foreign affairs. We're gonna lead off with a discussion of how Tony Blinken crawled to Beijing over broken glass and then crawled back. And I was really hoping for the yeah, exactly. Ron, you found this. Where was this cartoon? Are you back, Ron? So the Indians are off the reservation in South Dakota. That's what I take away from this. Anyhow, he found that, and I thought that was a pretty good summation of what had occurred with Tony, because it started out he got yelled at on the phone before he got there, and once he took that, then they brought him in, and then they yelled at him in person, and then they beat him up a little more, and they gave him, I think it was 20 minutes with Xi, something like that, and he managed to come out of that watcher with a photograph that I would caption as "Run and get the car, boy. Bring the car around." So if you can pull that up, It's like, yeah, thanks. It's the big Mercedes. Go get it, right? That's thank you, Mr. Xi. Now
it actually takes a pretty small guy to make Xi look big.
Yeah.
Well, so that's probably why he's leaning over.
Yeah, it's camera position. It's all that stuff.
It kind of looks like he took it up the
complete
ass.
lack of preparedness.
But I'll tell you what. Xi almost looks like a cardboard cutout there.
He does. He looks like a cardboard stand there.
Okay, I'm on the podcast.
They didn't even let
Sorry.
Blinken see actual G.
Wait. Is this the moon landing?
To me, it just looked like G
Stand
was
over
meeting
here.
his Uber driver.
It's
Look,
the moon landing.
guys, he went over his 20 minutes in the champagne room. He didn't have the extra to pay because our national Amex is a little bit overdrafted, and so he had to do the cardboard cutout for the exit photos. Look, guys, it's on a budget. We should appreciate this.
Hey, look, the federal government is saving money for any reason ever. I approve.
No, we sent it to Ukraine.
True.
Every penny counts.
But
Now, if Blinken
I
ever
said this-
showed up, at one of the many different strip bars in and around Kiev, I think they would comp him. I'm not sure, but I think
They probably
comp
would.
him.
They probably would.
They should.
You know, I said this earlier in the week, but Xi just always looks for the perfect time to take that photo, and this photo just encapsulates it all perfectly.
He's a master of doing the body language thing. He really is.
Oh yeah,
It's 40 years of training.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is. It is indeed.
You can't substitute for that.
So
and like I said too, this also brings out a fashion point, guys. Stop wearing the athletic, fit, skinny suits because you look like this versus a
seriously.
guy in a full classic suit.
It's
It really looks like G just told him, your boss wears a diaper.
also let me go back to this one. But hey, gents, don't tuck your fucking pants into your shoes.
No, that's what skinny pants always do, man.
But the other interpretation of this photograph, which is based in reality, is that Blinken knows that she was his ultimate boss at the point when he was running the Penn Biden Center and the Chinese were paying for it. And in all candor, all the humor aside, that's an immutable fact, right? And that is Blinky was an employee during their time in the wilderness during the Trump administration. So that you need to keep that fact in mind as we think about Blinken's relationship with anybody in China, because frankly they all know it. I mean, Jim, you can speak to what that means. I mean,
Total lack of strategic preparedness. That's just the overarching principle we're dealing with.
Well, let me help. I think this picture is worth 1,000 words.
Okay.
And I was given this one, so.
yeah.
It's the young Boogaloo guy.
I have gotten a lot of use out of that in the discussion around Blinken's trip. I've been able to point that out to any number of people that they were looking through the wrong end of the telescope on the Blinken trip to China. Well, so now that we've done the People magazine part, let's talk about the real the deliverables from this trip.
There were some.
Yeah, there were some. Name one, Giuseppe.
We delivered a bag of money to Xi. I can't imagine one. We gave Xi everything he wanted, and we got literally nothing in return.
We got a meeting.
I think we finalized the plans for the railroad.
The Trans-Pacific Railroad.
What was he even thinking?
Can everybody roll back about 10 years here? None of this should be a surprise. This is how Obama negotiated. This was in the world of that throwback to 10 years ago kind of mindset is America's leading from behind. We go to Iran and we say, Iran, we don't want you to have nukes. So what we're going to do is make sure that you have nukes and make sure that we can't inspect. I mean, none of the foreign policy is very familiar. How we treat people who are very clearly not our friends is very familiar. It's the same old game.
Yeah. I read that thing you sent with this Wang Yi guy, whatever, all the things underlined. And, the very bottom line that you had underlined, it says, on this issue, China has no room for any compromise or concession. Remember, it doesn't matter what he's talking about. That line right there should be the line that the American public or the American foreign policy takes. On this issue, we have no room for compromise or concession, or else we have nothing to talk about. So I read this thing with Wang Yi. Of course, it's one-sided.
This was their reading.
I understand,
Yeah,
but there's no, nothing in there. Just an example, say, intellectual property, rights and theft. They're not going to say that, but for one thing, the United States position should be there is no room for concession. Where I'm going is I don't know what Biden is sending Blinken over there to talk about. I don't know how the United States is going to trade fairly with China when you look at the labor the cost for labor here versus there and all that sort of thing. At the end of the day, you just can't get there from here. So I'm not sure why you send a guy over there that's allegedly for mill to mill, some kind of, we're going to work together military to military, and then 20 seconds later, Biden is saying, oh yeah, Xi is a dictator publicly. So there's a huge disconnect in messaging between what the president probably really thinks, which probably isn't wrong, and sending Blinken over there with his tail between his legs to beg for scraps. Horrible message. If you got nothing to offer, or you got nothing to, I'm going to lay down the law and just tell you there's no room for anything that, like this guy writes in his thing. Who knows what they were trying to achieve?
I think Don put his finger on something, Mike, and that is the Obama playbook. And let's just be clear, we're in the third season of the Obama playbook.
Sure.
Their playbook is, when in doubt, have a meeting. It doesn't matter, and the meeting is a substitute for actual activity because it commands press attention, and that's what it's all about. And so this meeting is meant to fill a void.
Who believes that? I mean, other than those that want to believe that fantasy.
51% of the American people.
81 million people.
81 million voters presumably believe that.
Well, so
this president's cabinet believes it.
The president's cabinet lives on the basis.
They live, eat, and breathe it.
It doesn't even matter if people believe it, right? So in the world of a very serious American cultural problem, right, is if you've ever worked in the corporate environment for any reason, no matter what the problem is or how insoluble, right, like Bob shot Tom, like, well, what we need to do is sit down and talk about this.
Yeah.
And it's a thing that we do. And sitting down and talking about after the 90s and early 2000s, we think that if we sit down and talk about things, then we're just gonna, we're on the way to solving the problem, even if we're not solving it, even if nothing happens.
It's fucking Star Trek. It's we're gonna sit down and talk about it. It's
Office Space.
Yeah, or Office Space. Yeah.
Yes.
But this is what they do when they don't have anything to go to. They do a meeting, and they will take any amount of grief to get to the meeting. From the Iranians, from the Chinese, used to be from the Russians, but we don't meet with the Russians anymore. But and I saw today that there was an article in the Financial Times talking about how the Americans helped Lula secure his election and keep that nasty Bolsonaro from winning. And I thought, oh my Lord. I mean, but there's another example. There's nothing we won't do for dyed-in-the-wool leftists or dyed-in-the-wool enemies of the United States in order to make it look like we're trying to do something when in fact all we're doing is we're pissing away the seed corn. That's a really mixed metaphor, but we're fiddling away our natural advantage. And
Well, we're certainly fiddling away time, which is really critical.
yeah.
I mean, I guess all I'm saying is, I think we would be better off not going somewhere and looking stupid and weak than going there at all.
But-
Do not have a discourse with these people unless you've got something to offer that makes some sense.
You have different objectives, right? So you don't go out and do any of this if what you're looking for is speak softly and carry a big stick, right? You don't. Any traditional American saying or value can't be on the table if you're doing any of this. And so this is the disconnect that almost everybody has watching these people do things. It's like, if I went to a meeting, no matter how big or small, I went to a meeting with my wife to discuss how often we're going to take out the trash, and what and what she said is, we're not negotiating. You're taking the trash out no less than once a week. And I went, okay, right. I look like a giant douchebag, and everybody knows that, right? And it doesn't matter if it's salary negotiations, this or anything else. If the intent is this superficial feel-good feeling, like, yeah, man, I really took it to my wife, which you get to go tell your friends as you're taking out the trash, right? Then, okay, good enough. But if you want something of substance, if you want a thing that matters, you can't do any of this, and everybody knows it.
Well, you guys know the phrase "real good meeting," right? And how that's a sort of cover for just activity for the sake of activity. That is real. We keep score in our foreign policy by how many real good meetings we have.
Yeah.
Well, there's two aspects to this, and I think you guys have hit the nail on the head. One is this administration's all about the illusion that they're doing something. They don't actually do things, but having a meeting creates the illusion that something's happening. And for the most part, it's pablum for the masses. They buy it. The second thing is, I looked at this meeting, and the question I asked is, if you were in Taiwan, what's your takeaway from this? Because that's all that really matters.
So you're buying a house in LA next week.
Yeah. I mean, seriously.
Taiwan's feeling like they're going to be looking like Blinken in a minute, bent over and sore.
Yeah.
Well, and so let's segue then to a little bit of the actual takeaways from this. So after all of the grandstanding that we've done vis-a-vis Taiwan, and we've marshaled, I'm going to steal a couple of lines from Joe Biden's campaign, the transcript of his campaign remarks in California. We've marshaled the Quad again, okay, or for the first time, or what have you. And Japan is going to spend money on armaments, and we talked them into that. I'm not sure we talked them into anything, but yeah. All this litany of stuff that they want to try to take credit for, and we're going to sell, and you guys keep me honest, I think it's $500 million worth of missiles to the Taiwanese, something along that order of magnitude. And implicit with that was the fact that, Taiwan, we got your back, and yet it wasn't 5 hours from when he shook hands with the cardboard Xi that Tony Blinken is in front of reporters talking about, we have always recognized the one China policy.
Yeah.
That's the cognitive dissonance in the room.
Well, so
and just to drive this point home a bit further, all of the glitterati in the political foreign affairs world were saying, "Oh, what a masterstroke! That put the Chinese off on the wrong foot because we recognize the one China policy." And I'm thinking, as you guys said, if I'm in Taiwan, what am I thinking when I hear this?
I don't think it's cognitive dissonance, right? One of those things that has been notorious in American politics for I don't even know how long is do the beginning of everything, and then whichever side looks like it's going to win, you already started to help that side, jump on it, and see you were on the winning side to begin with. And that's basically what they're doing.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. And the thing I'm seeing with Taiwan and these folks is they're running real-time polling, right? So when you have like 5 different departments of the government running real-time polling on what the population thinks about whatever's happening, you're going to get these time warps on response. And so you get these massive swings. And to the people who are changing the script, they don't care that it's diametrically opposed to what they said in the morning. All they're trying to do is harmonize with the data they're getting out of their polling, right? So the message in the afternoon could be totally different than the message in the morning. They don't care. They're responding to the polls, right?
Well,
and so that's how this kind of Blinken, Biden gets his marching orders while he's in California raising money from a totally different polling source.
Yeah.
And they're disconnected.
Yeah,
but they don't care, right?
Well, so you also, as long as you have a friendly press, right? And are we kidding ourselves here? He definitely does. But as long as you have a friendly press, in no circumstance is Biden criticizable on Taiwan now, right? If the let's pretend like Fox still does this. Well, not. I mean, for this show, he is clearly criticizable. But for public discussion, let's pretend the Fox News correspondent is going to ask him a serious question, like, "Well, what are you doing about Taiwan?" He gets to go, "Oh, we sent $80 quadrillion worth of missiles to them to prepare to defend." And then for anti-war people, he says, "Well, we did the one China policy, and and equally there are a bunch of people who are doing the running cover thing already, like, oh, this is a 4D chess move," which, by the way, it's the same statement. People are not out there saying anything other than this thing that looks like an obvious mistake is a serious win, which was the 4D chess meme for 4 years.
Well, I don't think it was a small coincidence that last week Yellen came out and said the United States can't afford an economic conflict with China.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, I mean, she really just hamstrung Blinken on the way out the door. Because you can't walk over there and go, "Hey, we're gonna you'd be facing sanctions and stuff." Basically, she said, "No, we can't do it."
Mom said no. Yeah, I was going to ask you to do this. So but here's the difference. Let's take some of the comments that we were talking about before the show started, and that China's got its own economic problems and one thing and another. And some of and a good number of those different topics are true, but China doesn't play it that way. Okay, they don't come out in public and talk about it and have the school marm come out and say, "Now you boys don't be playing with our economy because it's we can't afford that." And the other thing that Yellen said prior to this meeting was that the dominance of the dollar was going to naturally recede over a period of time, which really plays to the Chinese and the BRICS effort to try to come up with an alternative means of trade, international trade, that isn't dollar dependent. So Bretton Woods is on the table at this particular point as well. And I don't, these are own goals. I mean, these are scoring goals on our own, on our own goal that I don't understand. Maybe I'm not the Gandalf wizard on this stuff that I think I am, and because I don't see the pattern. Now, so Blinken comes out within minutes and says one China policy, and then follows on with Joe then follows on and calls Xi a dictator, and that Xi is such a dictator that he didn't know that the balloon was a spy balloon. The Chinese get all wrapped around the axle on that.
Wouldn't you think if he was a dictator, he would know literally everything?
No, so he calls him a stupid dictator.
A stupid dictator.
Which is even harder.
And then goes against the litany of things that we've said about China being our only peer competitor. And looks at the people at the fundraiser and says, "Oh, come on, man, China, no problem. We got China covered. Ain't no thing." And that was the takeaway from the transcript that I sent you that I was most sort of flabbergasted with, and that is Biden's that's just a reflex for him. When he doesn't know what to say, he tries to come off in that corn pop mode that says, "Hey, no big deal. You know, we got it covered." Come on, man.
Again, I think we're everybody roll back 15 years, right?
Yeah.
Mitt Romney and Barack Obama are debating prior to Obama's second term, and Romney says Russia is our biggest geopolitical threat, and Obama says the 80s called and they want their foreign policy back, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's this idea of dismissing anything that is a problem according to anybody else it's pretty standard data, and
blaming it on somebody else is the
exactly.
other corollary.
Of course, because nothing is their fault. I mean, come on now. Inflation is Trump's fault because reasons.
So if you watch this play out, and you're the Minister of Defense for Australia, or the Minister of Defense for Japan, or you're somebody in authority, or better yet, you're Prime Minister Modi, who's having dinner at the White House as we speak, right? You watch this stuff and you try to balance that against the constant sort of patter from the Americans that says, come on, we got to be in an alliance. Come on, we got to be in an alliance. We all got to pull together and pull against, Chinese aggression in the South China Sea and in the Pacific and wherever else we want to point at, the line of control. And you watch what's happening in Europe simultaneously, and you watch what happened in Kabul. And I'm sorry to bring that up again, but I think it remains a relevant point of measurement with respect to the Biden administration. And you watch the sort of incongruous manner in which this all goes off. How can you not be of two minds in terms of getting in bed with the United States in the construct of an alliance against a rising hegemon like China? Because the message out of this meeting from the Chinese perspective is that they're the equal of the United States. They were able to make that point to the rest of the world because Blinken had to crawl to get there. He crawled away with his tail between his legs. And the substantive aspects of this were that the Chinese established parity with the United States on the world stage. Now, I'm not quite sure that that's the actual aspect of where we are with them just yet, but that was the takeaway in international press around the globe that was not either in Western Europe or in the United States.
So what you're saying is we're kind of like the bipolar girlfriend who's trained in ninjutsu. We're really handy when you need us, but we're crazy and bipolar.
Well, I just think the record of being our friend is not a good one. Unless you're Ukraine, but we actually push Ukraine into what Ukraine's into at this point. But the point is that it's we're tough to live with.
Well,
yeah,
cheeky
Don.
out.
Oh, sorry, Blaine.
No, go ahead.
No. Don made a point earlier, which is 10 years ago, 12 years ago. I just sent Watcher something that he popped up, but it doesn't visualize well. But it's a list of major technology suppliers to the first big Chinese commercial airplane, C919. Mm-hmm. It's been more than a decade in the making, closer to 20 years. This is a who's who of defense and aviation contractors, right? And so all of these people have spent billions of dollars entering the Chinese market for a long-term strategic play. They are the people who are behind the Raytheon CEO's statement of this week, which is we cannot decouple. And, we've put ourselves in this position based on a 20-year plan of moving all this production outside of the United States and becoming an information economy. Now, all of a sudden, the schizophrenic bipolar girlfriend strategy is, oh, well, we're going to bring it all back. It will be here tomorrow. And, pick me up at 8 a.m. at LAX. It doesn't work that way, right? This is a 2-decade-long capital-heavy relocation of an industry segment. And this is just one industry, right? That's a snapshot of aerospace. And the scary thing about that aerospace snapshot is it's Raytheon-like organizations on which our national security and weapons purchasing is based. So the most vulnerable piece of our economy, the most critical strategic piece of our economy, is pregnant and overseas and on the phone saying, yeah, we'll come home. It isn't going to work. And we're sitting there going, you're my only baby. Come on home.
Yeah. And I'm
but
sorry,
it's going to
Max.
take 20 years, man.
I'm sorry Max isn't here because Max had a really poignant comment on Twitter today in response to why don't we get bang for our buck in our defense industry. And the Chinese get 60% more value per dollar equivalent out of their defense spending than we do because of the cost structure within the DoD procurement system. And the Russians can outproduce us in certain armaments for exactly the same reason, because we have a very expensive machine that we run, and yet we're still supposed to be getting the benefits of lower cost suppliers in our supply chain from overseas providers. I don't get it. I'm sort of flummoxed. I don't understand it.
Well, there's only one shareholder that has a strategic vote in the Chinese corporate model, right?
Right.
And so you get this dilution of strategy in the American and European public markets and transparency model. The Chinese can walk into one of the state-owned enterprises and tell them what they're going to pay them and say, what, the next cycle of R&D, the next 5-year plan, the next 10-year strategic cycle, if you want a piece of that, you're going to do this like this, and nobody argues because.
And the corollary is we'll make it up on the Americans.
Now, the interesting thing is here in the United States, this kind of national capitalism, it's beginning to smell a bit like that these days, which is they're playing with transfer pricing, they're playing with first in, first out accounting. Last in, last out accounting. They're swapping it at will. There's no inspector general activity around this stuff. That reality has been suspended for this crisis in Ukraine, which is, Raytheon, Boeing, LMI, give me everything you can give me for the next 5 years. I'll write you a big check. And we don't even know what the per unit cost is. And we're not going to find out what the per unit cost is because it's all going to get buried. It's the U.S. manifestation of the Chinese economic defense structure. We've just kind of done it ourselves, right? And we put it into our little box of rules and say, oh, look, it's because, we have the strategic imperative. It's perfectly compliant. Let's go with it. We'll sort it out later. It's because we have an emergency. We've used all of our anti-tank weapons. We've used all of our anti-aircraft weapons. We don't have enough, AMRAAMs. We don't have, build them, damn it. Get, double the plant size. We'll give you the money. This is exactly what centralized planning and places like China have done for 20, 30 years that we told them we didn't do. Now, all of a sudden, we're beginning to try to compete with them, but we really haven't changed the rules. We're just kind of dodging them. And at some point, it's going to catch up with us. Somebody's going to call these folks out. And I think it's beginning to happen. Congress is going to want to know what a replacement AIM-9X costs.
You're touching on the M4 Sherman answer, right? Which is, yeah. I mean, the argument in 41 was that we don't have a modernized military. We don't, even if we wanted to get into World War II, there's nothing we could do about it. And the lesson that people who talk about this took from World War II is that on a dime, the United States will turn off all manufacturing that is not war manufacturing and instantly have unlimited quantities of whatever war technology they want. The primary difference, of course, being that an M4 Sherman is an incredibly simple thing compared to basically anything that we field on a battlefield that is more complicated than an M4. So yeah, we could probably have a ton of riflemen in 36 hours, but we could not have, we could not make Abrams the way that we made M4 Shermans. It's just not possible to turn manufacturing. Ford is not about to start cranking out Abrams tanks or
Bradleys
really,
or whatever
right.
you want.
Yeah.
Well, we gotta wait for the Swedes to make the annealed steel from green hydrogen, right?
Yeah.
So, that's going to be a limiting factor. So you're never going to see B-24 Liberators coming out of giant warehouses in Michigan again.
Yeah.
It's just we don't have the wherewithal to do that, and we don't have the domestic components, raw materials, parts. We just don't have that. The capital heavy investment necessary to get to that point is beyond us now. Yellen made that really, really clear last week.
Oh.
And so we got to figure something else out. And I think that's what's got these guys in DC in a bit of a tizzy, because they're all hurrying to kind of get to the end of the election cycle before they're found out, which is why they don't want inspectors general. They don't want accounting. They don't want the discipline of describing what they're doing. They don't want introspection. They want to keep the crisis alive and keep committing borrowed money to sustaining the inefficient system that
Without with the questions put off by the fact that it's a crisis.
Exactly.
There's no time for introspection. God damn it, it's a crisis. Can't you see we have to do something?
Ukrainians are dying and the Chinese are ascendant. We got to do something. And by the way, but we love you a long time, right? So it's that bipolar nature of the policy that's just crushing us. And the rest of the world's looking at that bipolar thing. And I think Don touched on this. They're looking at that bipolar behavior and they're going, we really don't want you to come to dinner next week because we're going to be there with our parents and it's going to be really embarrassing because you're bipolar. And that's not an observation. It's not like calling somebody cisgender. It's not insulting. We just don't want you at the dinner table because it'll be too complicated. And I think, Stan, you were talking about Modi. I think the Indians are going to have a really hard time selling us internally based on this schizophrenia we're described.
I think, and there's a great piece, and I should have posted it. Well, you reacted to it, as did I, of a woman, Ashley, I can't remember her last name, and she's basically
that was Sybil, Stan. Sybil.
Sorry,
the woman's name was Sybil.
No, it was Ashley something or other. and yes, yeah. But the point is, she occupies, and so this is somewhat telling. She occupies the Tata chair, as in Tata Industries in India. So she's got a bent that is a little more Indo-focused than American-focused. And she's basically saying that India is making a mistake with this rapprochement with the Biden administration. And I agree with her to the extent that I think it will not work in the long run, and that we, in our rush to buy friends and influence, are throwing money at everybody at this point, willy-nilly. And the Indians are at least smart enough to say, well, we're going to get some while the getting is good. And I think that's Modi's explanation to the Indian people, and that is, we are the one of the longest lived sort of non-aligned countries in the world. That isn't going to change, certainly not to the degree that the Biden administration wants it to change. But if the Americans are willing to teach us how to make jet engines and give us the technology, we're prepared to listen. If they're willing to do this for us, we're prepared to listen. But I think there are real limits, and I don't think that this JV with the Indians and the U.S. is going to last very long, because the Indians have got to live in their neighborhood, not ours, and it's a tough neighborhood.
Well, if you look at the comments that G made coming out of this meeting, there isn't anything he says that isn't aimed at not just the U.S., but our allies. And that was the original question you kind of posed, is how does Australia and Japan kind of deal with this? And I was struck by the fact that he said the United States does not understand China.
Mhm.
And what he's really doing is sowing seeds of doubt, because when we're knocking on doors going, hey, you need to follow us, China's big bad, they're kind of going, we don't see it quite the way you see it in some ways. And gosh, even the Chinese kind of spot that you don't fully understand them. Am I willing to go to war with somebody, as my ally who doesn't really even understand who his opponent is? I could sow seeds of doubt.
Well, and nobody is too small to not get picked on from the Chinese perspective. And that was made evident today when the Chinese came out and supported Argentina's claims on the Falkland Islands. on the Falkland Islands.
Hey,
So
listen,
even the
Malvinas
irrelevant
permit
Brit
great sea lane protection base. That's what I'm
yeah,
saying.
we understand all that, and I agree with that. But my point is that nobody's looking to pick a fight with the UK right now because it really doesn't matter very much. They're stuck with 10% inflation and going sideways in a hurry in a lot of different ways. They're still willing to go die in Ukraine, apparently, but that's their choice, not ours. And yet the Chinese, having learned this in the Hong Kong transition, will not miss the opportunity to stick a finger in the eye of the Brits, which is telling in certain ways.
What was interesting was the language that was used was an anti-colonial language.
Yes.
Right? So
yeah.
it was the global South. That's why I think I tweeted, the South is red.
Yep.
It is. I mean, the Chinese are playing all of South America, all of Africa against the colonial powers, which basically is us now, right? A couple of European remnants, but it's the U.S. in their eyes.
Well, but they're all client states of ours, so.
Yep. So
it's also interesting that they threw out the colonialism card on the same week that they said, "Hey, that Okinawa island, we were there first."
Exactly.
Long time Chinese.
Well, that's historical fact, though, Joe. No,
we saw you egg roll.
Okay, yeah, exactly.
So,
well, that you see, but that's one of the interesting things about the Chinese is the Han predilection to suspend reality when it's something that can be described as Chinese history. And
so I wanted to finish our list of Chinese deliverables on this as well, and I think one of the ones that was significant was it wasn't 24 hours when all of a sudden this Chinese spy base in Cuba popped up again. Right? Bigger, better, whatever. And now I think I read where they're talking about putting troops in Cuba.
Yeah, training base too. If you want to see people do a 180, watch all of the Ukraine flag people on this, because they went from, it was not a threat to put NATO troops right on Russia's border to, oh my God, China's putting troops right on our border. It exposes the hypocrisy pretty easily.
Mike, you've been quiet. I want to hear your thoughts if I can, please.
Well, it's been said, and not just this show, every other. The reality is this is decades of sloth, and it's not just Joe Biden, it's not just Obama. We have handled the whole thing very poorly for a very long period of time, and you cannot just reverse it. And it's all very unfortunate. But all I was trying to say before is, I probably disagree with the statement that, and they're going to do this to poke fingers in our eye, and fuck them. I know they're going to do that, but it's not that we don't understand China. It's not that at all. What it is we cannot get our arms around the idea that we're not on the top. We're slipping away from being at the top tier. We just can't admit that. But at the same time, we have to point fingers as to who's at fault. In other words, we love, because we're stupid enough to like to do things that are ineffective. And we just have to go and make it public and do all this kind of stuff. So yes, So Hillary Clinton can say, I flew 1,000,000 miles. You achieved absolutely nothing with all those hydrocarbons in the environment, you're destroying. But yes, you flew fucking 1,000,000 miles. And unfortunately, there's not enough people in our country that
which is more than Ron Brown did, but till he met
want
with
actual accountability from the politics. Say that's very impressive. If you were a fucking 12-year-old and you told me that, I might say that's good, dear. That's great, honey. But you're not. You're the president of the United States. You're in Congress. Whatever position you're in. And I'm sorry. I hold you to a little higher standard than that. I want you to produce something. If it's only one goddamn thing in 4 fucking years, I'll be okay with that. One single effective thing. That's a victory in our world. And, my Lord, we've got to do something better than this.
Well, Mike,
anyway.
and that impassioned plea sort of takes me to the last deliverable that I was pretty exercised about in the concept of what did Tony do in his trip to Beijing, and that is Blinken's comments in a news conference, that same news conference where he reiterated the one China policy, that China really wasn't involved in the fentanyl trade anymore. Right.
Well, now, interestingly enough, there's quote a victory there. There is an admission that they were actually involved. They're actually admitting that they had cognizance, and they somehow were involved, and they did good things to get out of it. Horseshit.
Jim, explain how that works. They take it from a state-owned enterprise and they give it to somebody else, and it's
The difficulty is the U.S. entities have all done long-term strategic agreements with every state-owned enterprise that does anything consequential, and the difference is they took the things they didn't want to do and they took them to China. China took the things that we didn't want to do and figured out a way to control 100% of them, 95% of them. So rare earth magnets, little things that go whir and buzz and click, that, the connectors and the plugs and the wiring harnesses and the things that we didn't want to do in Europe and North America. And when you decide you want to put a complex system of systems together, like a missile or an airplane,
or a radio,
you need all that stuff. And we gave it away to be able to have competition amongst ourselves. We thought about our little bubble and forgot about the outside threat. We denied that they could be a competitive threat to us. And so literally everybody took their little things and moved them to China because they were cheaper by a little bit. And they got compensated in their bonus structures for that kind of efficiency. And now we're in a corner. And as Mike said, we're there. It's going to take a while to get back. But the fact that we're doing nothing about it, we're not even beginning to take small bites out of the elephant, to quote a friend of mine that I accused of being part of this world this week. We got to start. We got to start somewhere. And we do it by taking the hit.
I want to ask you or Stan, because I think you guys can answer it. I know I can't. Could we, let's say 6 months ago, whatever, could we have somehow stopped this, abandoning the dollar across the whole world kind of structure and, picking up the yuan? Just to pick one single, and it's not a little thing, but just one thing. Could we have at least retarded that, diminished that effort? Could we have succeeded in that single objective?
Well, I think we still could, Mike. But the problem is, it's the bottom of the ninth, and the home team. We're not the home team in this instance,
Yeah.
and the bases are loaded. And it's going to take a real effort, I think, to slow down that rate of decline. Now, the dollar's not going to go away, and if you go back and you listen to me talk about this in prior shows, I have always said this is going to take a long time to play out. I have to admit, I'm surprised at the pace at which it's playing out now.
It's moving fast.
It's moving much faster than what I would have anticipated, and we're still not yet at a tipping point. But what has happened? This is an unforced error on our part. A couple things that I read today reinforce this. Our mother of all sanctions, and those of you who sat on the CFC channel in late January, early February of last year, and we talked about the mother of all sanctions and the SWIFT system denial and all these things that, that Joe Biden said we're going to bring Russia to its knees in 30 to 45 days after they were announced. None of that has happened. And actually, all we've done is we've exacerbated the animosity with a whole bunch of trading relationships because we've completely disrupted markets to no impact. Okay.
We created friction and inefficiency on every commodity market on the planet.
Absolutely.
That
right.
other people could use to underwrite the new system of competitive platforms.
And there was a piece I read today. Let me finish real quick. There's a piece I read today that there are 59 U.S. companies that are using China as a cutout to get around electronic component sanctions to Russia.
Yeah. So I don't have anything exciting or interesting to add. I just run out of time and need to get out of here. But thanks for having me, gentlemen.
Well, I'd love to have you anytime, Don. You know that.
Indeed. One day my life will calm down, and that'll happen. I might be dead at that point, but my life will calm down.
Well, we'll put a camera on you if you're dead anyhow. We'll sort of watch.
We'll be close behind you.
We'll be close
Sounds
behind
fair. Thanks,
Take
gentlemen.
care, buddy. Thanks. Good to see you, man. But I think, to get to your point, Mike, I think that so much of what has caused the acceleration of this has been, again, an own goal, a series of unforced errors where we thought we were doing the right thing, even though that there's a body of evidence that show that sanctions really don't work. And I can take that back to the oil sanction against the Japanese in 1941. They're counterintuitive. I don't think the Trump tariffs worked really either. They're means that we use to try to address inconsistencies or non-competitive positions, but they're not able to be sustained. And so people looked at that and said, we got to get out of this. We are not going to let the Americans try to do to us what they're doing to other people. That's the basic undercurrent of why people are moving with their feet to try to find other ways to monetize economies, to do whatever. They just don't want to be exposed to our, and a member of this panel wrote an article today for And Magazine talking about the fact that we could sanction China because they can't produce their own food and energy and they'd be on their knees in no time. Bullshit. That doesn't work anymore. Okay. In a global commodity world, particularly, you don't think the Saudis are going to sell oil and gas or oil to the Chinese? You don't think the Russians are going to sell oil and all manner of food stocks to the Chinese? I mean, some of us are living in the last regime, and that stuff doesn't work anymore. And the more we do it, the more we give impetus to people to sort of carve us out of the system at some point.
That's exactly the sentence, Dan. We've created the impetus for them to carve us out. And the interviews with the Indian energy minister about 6 months ago when
we're going to buy Russian oil till the cows come home.
Because that's
India,
our job.
That's a lot of cows. Right.
My job is to produce and deliver cost-effective energy to the Indian people and to the Indian economy. That's my job. My job isn't placating the Americans' need to execute on these global sanctions, right? And so he's not going to starve his own people of energy to fulfill the American goal of limiting Russian liquidity, right? So what we had is all of the people who are supposed to be our allies are not going to participate in these schemes. And that leaves us pretty much gelded alongside the highway, which I think was kind of the image of our Secretary of State wandering around China this week.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm sorry you're there, man, and I really wish we had a policy. Conversations are not a policy, and it isn't going to be quick, and it isn't going to be pretty, but we're going to have to start taking small bites soon, or it won't matter, right? And I think one of the things that Americans forget is it's a perception issue. We are perceived as being confused and bipolar right now. They see us in this way. And we need to straighten that out. And having these real-time polling conflicts in messaging that we're seeing between Biden and the State Department and the Treasury, it's got to get harmonized. They need.
Jim, can I ask you a question? Because it starts with the answer to this question. And this is going to sound too simplistic by half, but I'm going to do it anyhow. And that is, who runs the United States?
I don't think anybody does, Stan.
Okay. That's probably the most innocuous answer we can have. But if nobody runs the United States, then what are we trying to achieve?
Continuity.
So the status quo.
I think that if you were to ask people in the street,
No.
I'm
talking about
things
the
way
cabal.
we are.
Well, but what does history teach us?
I don't
That
think most
anytime-
people are versed in history.
Well, but this panel is, so I'm going to ask the question of this panel. So what is the desire to maintain the status quo usually leads to decline, right?
Absolutely.
Is that a fair statement?
Yeah.
Yep.
Because life doesn't work that way. You can't maintain the status quo as it relates to, it ain't the 50s anymore. That set of circumstances no longer exists. It's not the 70s anymore. That set of circumstances no longer exists. That doesn't mean that the values that you apply to that set of circumstances aren't the same or can't be consistent or conservative. But it just means that you can't do the same things that you did in the 50s and expect it to work any longer. Let me go one step further, Mike, because that's the most favorable outcome. I believe that the people who run the United States at this particular point, who are in their third term, have as their goal the diminution of the United States. The she-male of one of them talked about never being proud of the country in her life until her concubine got elected president. And so I believe that the diminution of the United States is in fact the goal. On which case they're doing really great at this particular point.
So you're saying we're being right-sized by our own.
I firmly believe that. And for all of you who think that I come off as anti-American from time to time or not in lockstep with our goals as it relates to OTAN or anything else, it is because of that fact. I don't despise the United States. I love the United States. My problem is what the United States has become and what we're allowing it to become at the behest of a group of people who want to tear it down.
Yes, I agree. And I was going to say it before when you were talking about sanctions as an example. And what we really need is to probably have someone come on board that's going to clean the slates and say, okay, we need to start all over, at the drawing board and just start everything all over again. For example, you mentioned it before, why do we have this hard on that the UK is our greatest at, blah, 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 blah. I mean, being very callous and cynical, you could look at the relationship, as a historical basis. That's great. But what does the UK have to offer as far as resources, et cetera? Not really a lot.
Good
tea. Yeah. So
That grows in India.
If someone came on board and said, we're going to do things differently. We know historically, and I can show you all the data, I can point this out, that sanctions have never worked. Just start there. Sanctions don't work. So we're not going to do that. We're going to do something else. The alliances that we have in place are based on 50s geometric, whatever stuff, that don't really suit today's much more global environment. And we have to look at different vectors and yada, yada, yada. We got to do something different. But every time we have an election roll around, it's JFK Jr. or whatever, whoever he is. It's
RFK.
Chris Christie. They have different names. They say different, but I don't know. If someone laid down, these are the policies of Chris Christie, 1 through 10, and someone wrote down, here's Donald Trump, 1 through 10, here's the Florida guy, 1 through 10, and then analyzed, what's the major difference, between these three people. Probably really not a lot. It's all about presentation, and we're enamored with who's popular and who's not. So
yeah,
I think you're right, Stan. We need absolutely ruthless, fundamental change. With some admission that certain things aren't working, and we really have to devise a totally different plan, because what we're doing, status quo, ain't working. Or, maybe it's working at 62% efficiency. And I'm with you, Stan. That is not good enough.
no,
We're better.
no. And there's archaeological evidence that we can be better. But it's becoming archaeological in the amount of time that it's taken for us to basically fritter it away.
Well, you commented about the Obamaites and issues of national interest and American competitiveness and preeminence. It's an interesting problem. I mean, I've been talking to Chet Nagel about this for probably 20 some years now. The concept of national interest is not even in our conversations anymore. And it's too long term of a vision, the concept of national interest. and so it's kind of fallen out of the parlance in DC. Whereas it used to be, you could walk into a room, sit down with, and get 2 or 3 people to agree that it was in national interest to do something, and it would move forward. Not all of them were pretty, right? I mean, there were some things done in the 50s, 60s, and 70s that wouldn't be beautiful. And
Jim, you could argue that the worst thing that ever happened to the United States was the fall of the Soviet Union. You really could.
Well, the loss of the evil empire.
The loss of a peer competitor who was never going to catch us economically because of the system that they were running, but still provided enough of a threat to keep you on your toes. So what happens to every heavyweight boxing champion after they've sort of won the championship?
They get facial tattoos and they move to Vegas.
Well, they get fat and they don't train anymore, right? And they sort of lose their edge, right? The Soviet Union kept us on our edge. And I'm not being an apologist for anybody, but that's just a fact. That's life. You know, if you're on top with nothing that keeps you up at night or nothing that keeps you on your toes, you atrophy. And
So why can't
we wasted our dominance period on things that didn't move the needle for us. And you and I were part of that. We were part of that globalization effort. Okay. And I'm sorry to, I'm okay. Okay.
Well, but some of this is everything now is framed against society and against our culture, rather than the national good. And we have bred away every bit of our competitive nature as a nation. We hand out so many damn participation trophies and ribbons to kids that we have men competing against women in sports. We have a screwed up sense of what competition is and how it should be done. And we don't breed into our kids or teach our kids to struggle and fight and overcome and be the best. They're more worried about how many, thumbs up they get on Twitter. And it's crazy at this point. And that is spilled into, I think, our discussion about national policies and what's best for our country is, well, what's best for me? What's best for me personally overrides what's better for all of us.
Well, and what that's become real quick, Mike, and then I'll give you the floor here. What that's become is we don't talk about what's best for the country. Mm-hmm. We talk about what's best for this subgroup. So, and look, our State Department is the prime practicer of this. Everything that we do, these are not my words. These are the Secretary of State's words. Everything that we do from a foreign policy perspective is viewed through the lens of LGBTQ plus prime, whatever, n to the 14th power. Okay? Everything that we do from a foreign policy perspective has to have that component in it. And it has, and the outcome has to be viewed as to what is best for that community or what is best for another supposedly marginalized community in this, and that is the thing that has ripped the country apart, which is the bifurcation of all of us into little bitty groups that have to all have their lens shown upon an outcome for there to be a consensus, and there never will be a consensus in that regard. And the climate people are there, and the DEI people are there, and the CRT people are there. And whatever else, whoever the group of the week is, Asian American Pacific Islanders, fuck them. We bailed them out in World War II, right? So I'm done. We gave it the office.
So what you're talking about is
there are no American values remaining any longer.
They've been fragmented purposefully.
Yes,
to suit other people's political and strategic goals. And we've allowed it to happen. And we've allowed it to happen by, I think, Mike, you were calling out the concept of sloth. The country has become sloth-like. We move slowly. We complain a lot. Don't piss us off because
we're fat and we're out of shape.
Yeah, well, sloths they can surprise you. Put it that way. They move fast when they need to.
Mike, but I cut you off earlier, so
I was kind of
sorry.
I wanted to leverage from what Blaine was saying, but the word that has disturbed me for many years at this point is the word legacy. There was a time when the President of the United States spoke, and he put things in terms of, this is in the nation's interest. Those are the words that came out of a president's mouth. And that was his mentality in the way he approached the job. And I want to say it's Clinton, but it may not be. But then this whole, concept, constantly being talked about, always, his legacy, blah, 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 you know, it was newspaper reporters or whatever saying it a lot
Mm-hmm.
because it's kind of what the president wanted to hear. He wanted to put things in terms of, well, what kind of crap am I going to put up in the wall in my presidential library? And that became, I think, a motivating animus of the president. And then I think the American people accepted, they accepted that. They're like, oh, we want a celebrity to play saxophone. That's really cool. He looks good in silkies. You know, I'm going to vote for him.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a whole kind of a mentality that it does go back to the American people, and we're every generation just kind of slips from, you know, patriotism as you know, the Pledge of Allegiance and that sort of thing. And it's, I think Blaine was saying, now it's all about how many thumbs up we get on Twitter or you know, whatever social media metric of popularity is. And unfortunately, Ron's not here. He's the first guy I heard say it, and I always liked it. He should trademark it. Is we're not a serious nation, and that's evident when our Secretary of State goes to China and is disrespected by the guy. He knows he's got the fuzzy nuts. He knows he's got power. He's got us by the short hairs, and he fucking knows it. And why is that? It's not really militarily. For some reason, we get so wrapped around the action about, you know, military might and how many tanks we have, and we're the greatest military in the world. What we need to do is get our economy, you know, dominant. And when that happens, all these motherfuckers all over the world will come crawling back to us, because we will then have much more control because of economic might, not how many tanks, not how many aircraft carriers and that sort of thing. You know, that's where we need to focus our efforts, is getting that part of Mojo back. And
Well,
you know,
that's going to mean
sorry,
reshoring a
Mr.
lot
President,
of stuff that we've
it's
moved.
not about your legacy. It's not about your ego.
Yeah. All right. Let me wrap this segment up with some sort of final thoughts on where does this leave us vis-a-vis the relationship with China now, going into a presidential election in which Biden wants to talk about anything but China, which is, I think, why he made the comments that he made at that campaign stop in California. Oh, come on, man! It's just China. We got China covered. Joe, thoughts? Where are we headed with China in your view? Push the button.
Brilliant. We're headed more and more to a direct confrontation that I think China expects us to just bow out of. And one of two things will happen. We'll do exactly that, and which is what I think our comments were this week. We're not going to defend Taiwan. But the other problem is we might just get involved, and that'd be even more disastrous for us, because in our current state, we can't hold back not just China's might in the near shore fight that we would have to fight, which is within 200 miles of the Chinese shore. We can't survive in that. The other thing that we can't hold back is the unrestricted, unconventional warfare that would be going on inside the United States. Matt recommends this book. It's called Spetsnaz, and you read the very last chapter, and it talks about what a war with America would have looked like for the Soviet Union the first 30 days. And it looks a lot like trains derailing mysteriously, food plants going up in flames, shootings in malls, things like we're seeing now. And that's why we're seeing all these Chinese men just pouring over the border. I think that we're headed for a very bad place with China, and we're going to have a tough decision to make, and it's going to be pretty unpalatable either way.
Fair enough. Blaine?
I have to agree with everything Joe said. We keep thinking in terms of military might, and and our capability to project. But this would be like us invading Cuba almost. It's so close to their shore, and it's so far away from us. And the only way we could do it is to have a solid alliance-backed support. And I don't know if our allies will really stand behind us in the Pacific region anymore. We keep sending such weird mixed messages in terms of what we're going to do and how we're going to do it when it comes to China that I think we've opened the floodgates. It's really a question of, are they going to pull something during the election cycle, which is brilliant, by the way. That's the time to do it. Because, and it is Joe Biden trying to egg this on so that he can be seen as a wartime president and hopefully, cling to his office. That's just
I think there are physical limitations to his ability to project that. I don't think that anybody buys that the frail, and I'm being kind, the frail old man that we see as the stimulants wear off, that there's any way that guy's actually in charge of anything. I don't know how you act like you're a wartime president when you got to get down for your nap at 4:00.
Yeah, I agree.
That was harsh.
Well, but it's true, Joe. I'm
Yes,
sorry.
it is. It is absolutely.
Well, he does it right after his 3:30 diaper change. So,
And who do we send to throw down the glove? Anthony Blinken. I mean, come on.
But it's awfully interesting then if the election becomes a pivot point as it relates to a war footing. There's no way that you can keep Kamala Harris on the ticket, is there? Huh?
Yeah.
And I mean, and she's easy to punk, but that's a legitimate question. There's no way that you can keep Kamala Harris on the ticket, at least not in my view. But I'm guilty of trying to apply rational thought process to this, so I don't know. Mike, where are we headed with China?
Well, no, supply lines alone is a non-starter. The logistics are just way against us and much in their favor. So, anyone thinking militarily, it's really not a very attractive scenario. One, politically, Biden would desperately need a wartime consigliere, and I don't think Kamala is it, nor do I think Gavin Newsom from California would be it. And I don't know anyone in the Democratic Party offhand that
he was at McKinsey and he wore his naval intelligence.
I mean, very seriously, there's no one. That would just be.
Where's Sam Nunn when you need him, right?
That would just be a horrible thing. I mean, if you really think that's what he thinks will keep him clinging to the good Lord, that's a failure written all over it, and that's just being kind. Let's hope not.
Yeah, Watcher, any thoughts? All right, I want you to think about this. I'll give you mine while you're thinking about that.
All right.
I think the major criticism I have of all of the folks like Eldridge Colby and Patrick Fox and that whole wing of the AutoZone Institute for International Policy is that they think Peter Zahan, all these guys. I think that they all think that the Chinese are going to balk at a conflict because of trade, because their economy's not lifting off back from COVID quite the way they thought it was going to, because of their demographics, because. I'm going to offer to you that I think that in Xi's mind, the guy who has come out and made the central part of the Communist Party National Committee meeting the phrase "dare to fight," I think they view that the Biden administration, because they bought and paid for it, I think they know it inside out, And I think they think that the vulnerability of the Biden administration in an election cycle is a once in 300-year opportunity vis-a-vis Taiwan. And they're willing to, the Chinese people still have muscle memory of privation, of poverty, of national purpose and unity. The Russian population has never lost it. They've had it for 1,000 years. We don't have any of that. And the point is that they'll take the hit to capture the once in a 300-year opportunity to claim Taiwan. And it's not going to stop there, because once you've got Taiwan, you've got the 9 dash lines and all the rest of that sort of stuff. And I think they're going to do it not with an invasion. This goes back to episode 2 of the Privy Council. I think they're going to do it with a blockade. And I think they're going to dare us to try to break the blockade.
Yes.
And they're going to throw the one China
Absolutely.
policy back in our face and say, you want to take your rusted Navy and bring it out here and try and do this? Go ahead. Do it in an election year. And people in this country are not going to vote for that. And Taiwan will fall in 60 days. That's my estimation of where we are.
Meanwhile, during that 60 days, we lose internet and cell phone service all over this country, and random bad things happen on the roads, rails, everywhere.
Yeah, and that takes us to our own version of Red Dawn, which allows us to then segue to our next topic, which is the IRS ATF raid on a gun store in Great Falls, Montana. I have so much to say about this that I don't want to start, because I won't let anybody else get a word in edgewise. But I'm going to assume.
Hey, Stan, can I just
Yeah.
pop in? Because I got to pop out.
Yep.
So I just have a few things to say, which I think are kind of interesting in this particular topic.
Yep.
One of my best friends, and I can't name names, but one of my
Right.
best friends owns a gun store, very large gun store range.
Mm-hmm.
And when you posted, this is a topic, for discussion, the 4473s, all that kind of stuff. I reached out to him and I said, "Hey, man, I'd love to see if you'd like to come on the show. If you,
Right.
and if you would, I'll ask Stan and coordinate it. Yada yada." Anyway, blah blah blah. And the bottom line is, he said, I think I want to pass.
Yeah.
Because I'd be putting myself out as a target. I mean, that has got to tell you something about this scenario.
It does.
This guy, not afraid for his life, but he's just doing the prudent business thing. He's like, it's not worth the risk, man, because the word gets out there. Next thing you know, what happened to the guy in Montana is going to happen to me. So I mean, I just thought that was kind of
that's
interesting.
that's perfectly logical, Mike. And I'll be honest
Absolutely.
with you, I reached out to this guy in Montana, and he said on advice of counsel, I'm not talking to anybody else.
Hell yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I talked to Matt Rosendale's office, who's a congressman who's sort of taken him under his wing, and they said, we'd prefer that, and we think it's in his interest that he not say anything publicly at this point.
Yeah. So it makes sense. So he declined, but then he refreshed my memory of a few facts, salient facts regarding this thing. This guy I'm talking about, he's been in this business almost 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
So he's been doing it a while. When I was down to visit him, I went into his new shop, which is huge and all this kind of stuff. He has one room that is about, 25 feet by 15 feet wide, full of paper copies of these 4473s, which he is obliged to keep forever.
Right.
And he also has to make an electronic, copy of them. So he takes a picture of them and he puts them on a web server or something somewhere. He is so paranoid on every single one of these things, of just making a clerical error lest some ass-paying ATF dude knocks on his door and, says, I need to see your 4473s, yada, yada.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
I mean, he's got 40 years of these. He's got 100,000, 200,000. I don't know. Those boxes, the banker's box.
Bankers
things.
boxes, yeah.
He's got, these things are stacked 8 feet high, in this whole room.
In some sort of system where he can access if somebody says, I want to see.
Well, I think the electronic is a little more searchable, but not a lot. Either way, he has to employ a woman full time. That is her job. Filling out these things, making sure they're correct, yada, yada, getting filed properly, humma.
Hmm?
And what he told me is, the ATF guys, just like any particular government, or maybe even law enforcement, some guys are going to be dicks, and some guys, they're just doing their job, and they're you can get along with them. But it's kind of luck of the draw. And he has not necessarily felt he has been intimidated, but he has over a couple times, a couple periods of time over these years, had very intense interest in some of the things, with these 4473s.
Right.
So there is an environment, and there certainly is a possibility of the abuse of this power. Just like anything, just like electronic surveillance and law enforcement, just like anything, it's chipping away at your rights. So I just thought this kind of emphasizes that this guy in Montana is not alone. This sort of thing is happening all over the country. To guys just, I read the articles you sent. There's not huge margins.
No.
In this stuff, it's done. If you make money, it's because of volume, but it's not high profit for every single transaction. But the administrative state for this particular business, this industry, is massive, and yes, indeed, there is a lot of potential for someone to apply political leverage on anybody. It just, if they want to target these guys. You saw the Obama administration target IRS, years ago.
Conservative 501c3s.
This is all in the playbook. So I just thought I'd lend that. There's other people other than Mr. Montana.
I know that there is. I think that what's new about this, Mike, and I think what got my attention about this and when I tweeted about it, everybody sort of talked about that scene in Red Dawn where the Cuban guy says, go to the sporting goods store, look for 4473s. That's the list of people we got to round up, right? And so what's new about this is the rollout of some of the 87,000 armed and trained IRS agents. That's what's new about this, okay? Is that it's armed IRS agents in conjunction with ATF, and I was sad to learn, in conjunction with the Great Falls Police Department, who had their backs in this instance. And it's the IRS rolling in. And before you leave, I want to leave this point with you, and you probably read it if you read the stuff I sent around, and that is the 4473s were not covered in the warrant that was served. They were not asked for by the ATF in this instance.
And there's no valid reason. Yeah.
And the IRS took them anyhow.
Well,
and that is your government sending you a message.
So from what I understand, again, from talking to my friend, the owner of the gun store, the licensee or whatever they call it on the form,
FFL, right?
The guy with the FFL, that's the seller essentially of that transaction, He is obliged to surrender those documents at any time. There's no warrant. They don't require a warrant. You are obliged to surrender those. But that's not IRS. That's ATF.
That's not IRS.
Yeah, but that's
And
to the
that's
ATF. You
huge.
cannot
That's a big
surrender them to
difference.
the IRS.
Because the ATF didn't ask for them, but the IRS agents, and in one of those articles, there's a description of sort of the kerfuffle that went on, and they said, "Oh yeah, we'll take them anyhow." Now, in this guy's instance, it was 13 years of 4470s they said they were probably like 25,000, something like that. He's not that big a dealer in that. But now you've got not just the ATF, but now you've got the IRS weaponized to come after the key linchpin of your ability to legally obtain a firearm in a country where the Second Amendment is supposed to be still in force. It is a big old camel nose under the tent, in my opinion.
This also raises that issue of licensing, right? This is one of the reasons why I'm against ham licensing, because an FCC agent can show up at your door at any point in time, accompanied by whomever he wishes to be, and that's where this goes. So the IRS had a warrant to look for tax records, but they bought the ATF along because the ATF doesn't need a warrant to do a lot of things in a gun store, right? So that expanded the scope of their warrant. So if the FBI decides that Blaine Pardoe could possibly be a terrorist, but they have no information because he writes these books, but Blaine has a ham radio license, they can show up at the FCC and say, "We're here to inspect your radio equipment." Meanwhile, that FBI agent does a plain view inspection of what's inside your home while he's there. That's the slippery slope. And as you just said, the camel's nose under the tent. Man, we are at a really, really dangerous point.
Yeah, I mean, I read through the articles, and I don't know a lot about gun stores. And by law, I own no guns, just for the record. Wink, wink. But I will say this, this reminded me of Matt Taibbi when he went to Congress and the FBI showed up at his doorstep.
Yeah.
This weaponization of the federal government. I don't think of it as ATF. I don't think of it as IRS. This has been ongoing for some time. We saw it during the Obama administration with the IRS targeting conservative groups. We had this whole instance of IRS people showing up and FBI people showing up for Matt Taibbi while he's testifying up on Capitol Hill. And now you've got this type of instance. I think that the federal government is literally becoming a dangerous, oppressive tool.
It's starting to look like the Chinese Communist Party from a domestic perspective.
Yeah.
There was also during the Obama administration an effort in the bullet making industry, the component of the gun industry. Fucking around with the supply chain, I think specifically for like petting that's used in the not the firing pin. What does the firing pin strike, Joe? The blasting cap. What's the when you're reloading, you put that little
primer.
Percussion cap?
Yeah, the primer.
Yeah.
So they were doing things to make it so expensive, to dissuade people, primers, therefore, and I think the propellants also, the gunpowder propellants they were dicking around with, to make it so expensive that, people will just want to shoot. It'll reduce the amount of rounds out there, so people won't buy stuff and shoot people. I mean, it's always under the cover of, if it saves one child, it's always on the, the cover of it sounds really good. And really what it is, it's a total disarmament effort. And this Bubba in Montana, this is just another prong of a multifaceted strategy they have that They'll find one way or another.
It's all about messaging. So let's flip this around for a minute. It's just like our incoherent foreign policy is all based on messaging at the moment. Okay. Here in the domestic arena, they've got the ability to really exercise a tremendous amount of power over our citizens by rule and regulation and all of this sort of stuff. And I just want to juxtapose, because this is what really caught me, really sort of shocked me around this issue. It was partially the fact that they went in and shut this guy down and did what they did as it relates to this poor guy in Great Falls. But the timing of this messaging, in coincidence with the Hunter Biden plea deal, if you're not paying attention, if you aren't getting the message that is being directed at you, then you got a problem. Because the issue is, we can marshal every bit of the power of the federal government to come harass you, to come look for things, to come do whatever we think we need to do. And as we've seen with Donald Trump, we can make shit up and get a good 3 or 4 years out of it by just making it up, because we can continue the investigation. We can suppress evidence in those instances where it doesn't comport with the story that we've made up. But if you're on the inside, if you're Hunter Biden, you can plead to a misdemeanor on willful tax evasion. And by the way, has anybody seen the number that he's supposed to have tried to evade taxes on? Because I guarantee you it doesn't begin to touch any of the money that sort of rolled through that whole Biden, the things that we're learning about. The
biggest lesson here is that willful failure to file your taxes is a misdemeanor. Sign me up.
Yeah, that's
Sign
what.
me up.
Well, it is for him. It ain't for you.
Yeah.
Okay. And so we got both components here in stark relief. We've got the IRS raiding this guy in Montana, probably also looking for things where, pistol braces and things of that nature and whatever, and the ATF. And on the other side of the coin, we've got the IRS and the ATF and the resolution of the Hunter Biden case, in which case he pleads down to a misdemeanor on tax evasion, which could encompass tens of millions of dollars that aren't declared and taxes aren't paid. And his willful violation or fraudulent filing of a 4473 to buy a Colt Cobra pistol that he ended up throwing behind a trash can behind a grocery store. Okay? You or I did that, we'd be in jail.
Actually, his ex-wife did it, and therefore he failed to report a stolen pistol, which is another federal crime.
Yeah. But so if you're looking for the two levels of justice in this country, I can't think of a better example than these two things set side by side. They involve the same agencies, they involve the same sort of underlying aspects, one taxes and the other firearms. And you are supposed to get hit right between the eyes with the message that says, don't fuck with us unless you're one of us.
Well, one of my favorite quotes is, "There's no greater tyranny than that which is perpetrated under the shield of the law and in the name of justice."
Yeah.
And
the concentration camps and execution of Jews was legal.
Yeah, this is this is all in the name of justice, and I don't even think it's a two-tier legal system. It's who's got money and who doesn't. Who's got people in positions of power that can help them and who doesn't. I don't hear any offers being made to Donald Trump, for example, for plea deals to plead away some of these crimes. Oh, absolutely not. But with Hunter Biden, it's like, oh, hey, if you'll go get drug tested and go to counseling, we're going to let this go. You got to be freaking kidding me.
And the gun charge was a pretrial diversion. So it's like it never happened.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. He's still the brightest guy that Joe Biden's ever met.
This is
Not really saying much.
here's your lawyers. Lawyers sat there and looked at this, and they devised this little scheme. I'm sure, technically speaking, everything they're doing is technically above board, but it's obvious to anyone that is paying any bit of attention. These concessions are being made through privilege because of who Daddy is, and Daddy still aspires to get a second term. I mean, it's not just Daddy then as the vice president. It's not just Daddy now as the president. It's future Daddy. So, and they came up with all these little stratagems that, if you're stupid enough to believe that these things just came out of the sky, that's fine and dandy. But a lot of people are not that stupid. I think it's so obvious, but people are just, generally speaking, they're just beat down. You watched 4 years of Donald Trump being drug through the mud on Russia, and today it comes out in testimony. The FBI initiated Operation
Crossfire
without a shred of actual evidence, right? Everyone, not everyone, many people knew 4 years ago that was the case, but, quote, no one had come forward and testified under oath. These are the niceties of the legal system, whatever, but the reality was that was exposed a very, very long time ago. But now we're going through the motions of, quote, investigations and, a legal due process kind of thing. But I think, generally speaking, people are just they're literally demoralized and beat down that they just don't give a shit. But just get it off my television, please. I'm waiting for one day when there's going to be fluffy bunny rabbits on the news channel, and someone's going to tell me everything's all right. People are waiting for that. They're waiting for that fantasy, and they're just tired that, so Hunter Biden's going to get it. And people are there until it comes around and it's them in the crosshair. That's what they're not getting. This is all fucking window dressing crap.
What's the Bonhoeffer quote? First they came for the whatever, and then everybody wants to be left alone until the NKVD knocks on your door, and then it's a big deal. So
you don't have to like Donald Trump or dislike him, but he's made a couple of very valid points. One, he pointed out in his administration, more than any, validated that there is indeed a deep state and it's not working in the benefit of the American people. And two, he's pointed out several times in recent weeks that, if they can come for me as a former president and as a person who's running for office right now, if they can come for me like this, imagine what they can do to you. And it's a valid point. It's not disputable. You can't sit there and go, well, they won't do it. No, they will. This guy in Montana proves it.
If they come to indict any of us, we don't get to take our Secret Service detail with us, do we?
Yeah.
Right. No.
Right. So, this event, which got almost no coverage nationally, almost none. So if you use DuckDuckGo or Bing or Google or whatever, and you Google news articles on it, what you get is what I sent you guys, which is, some of it's not worth repeating because it's third derivative resourcing of stuff. But you get local news out of Montana, a couple of other articles. It's been memory holed already, except for those of us who are supposed to get the message. I won't forget it. I hope you won't either. because it's a reality that you're going to have to deal with going forward. And I don't know. I know one panel member has written a series of books about how to be prepared for times like this. One panel member has written a series of books that tells you how it's going to end, or almost has gotten to the point. Starts with Blue Dawn, proceeds from there. And one panel member has written a series of books that tells you how to fix it. You need the warlock. So you're in the right spot if you want to know what the hell's going on and what you need to be doing to get through and I'm sorry to say this, I think the coming domestic difficulties that we're going to face, and I think this election cycle is going to be material, both from a foreign policy perspective, but probably even more so from a domestic scenario. It's going to be a watershed, and the outcome is going to be unlike most of what we've ever seen in this country. I think this is an election that's as consequential as the 1860 election back in the day. So,
and with all the volatility that comes with that, I agree.
Yeah, I just think that
well, on a side note, China sees some vulnerability for them in waiting until after that election, because the outcome is not certain. So that election prompts them to move sooner rather than later.
Yes.
Yeah, but I think the country of Sun Tzu is going to be pretty calculating in terms of how they do it. I don't think that they're going to try to invade Taiwan.
No, I don't either. But if I was going to push it, would I wait until I have a potentially better president, or do it now?
Yeah.
So, and I was actually happy to see our friends at Nightbridge kind of roll back their original prediction to kind of get a little bit closer to ours of 2023 to 2025. So.
Yeah, this window of opportunity extends into the early months of the next presidency, assuming that it's not the Biden administration. I can see a sort of starstruck Gavin Newsom staring into the camera, not knowing what the hell to do when the Chinese encircle Taiwan.
That's okay. Gretch and her two witches will take care of it.
Or Aunt Nancy. One of the two.
Speaking of, this ties right into that whole story of encroaching tyranny. The Michigan legislature is considering a bill right now to make hate speech a 5-year felony. The problem with hate speech laws is that it always, always, always depends upon the point of view of the complainant. I can say, I don't like your hair today, and they can say that's hate speech.
Yeah.
And that's problematic. Sure, if it gets challenged in the Supreme Court, it'll get tossed out on the grounds of the First Amendment. But somebody has to be arrested for it the first time for that to happen. And that's where we're headed. So,
all right, I'm gonna wrap this up. We're 15 minutes over what I normally like to do here, but I think it's been well worth it. I'm going to look for updates from our publishing panel. Tactical Wisdom 5. Any update on that?
Yeah, we've completed another whole chapter, and we're doing the research and prep work for another. It's really cranking along pretty well.
Good. Glad to hear it.
Just give it a couple of weeks here.
Blaine, I think you've got 3 plates spinning at this time. Is that correct? Have I got that?
I've got 2. Next on Sunday, the next book in Land and Sea drops, which is my military sci-fi series, and on August 8th, No Greater Tyranny drops.
Mm-hmm.
The Blue Dawn. So,
is that pre-order status at this point or no?
Yeah, it's pre-order on both.
And where do we go get that?
Amazon.
I think Amazon.
I'm an Amazon guy.
Okay. And Mike, I know you're you're writing away. Yeah,
Scribbling.
writing away. I was trying to say scrivenering away. So
I put out a tweet today. I finished the 1980s portion of Moss to the Flame. So now all I have to do is write the 90s. It's easy. right?
Is
what
that why you
happened
asked
in
for
the
that
90s?
picture of me?
Huh?
Is that why you asked for that picture of me in Somalia? Was for the 80s or 90s part? Just kidding.
No, but hey, sounds good. So yeah, and it's too bad Ron's not on. I wanted to thank him. It's funny he bought the cigar box, and he posted his picture and it made fun of his LZ. That tweet got 3,500 looks.
I believe it.
Usually I don't get 350. People loved it, I guess.
Yeah.
So the legend of Ron Moeller is still alive.
I get that too at my house. When she makes a tweet, she's like, I get like 35 views. You retweet it, I get like 2,500. I'm like, what? I can't help you.
Yeah,
You're
Can't
supposed
help
to
you,
be
bro.
making t-shirts, honey. Come on.
Yeah,
let's
get
go.
the t-shirt. Get cracking on the t-shirts.
So
She's
what
asleep.
is
I can
what
say
is
that
the
right now.
what is the status of the sort of t-shirt effort as it relates to
Well,
tacticalism?
there was some. She is a perfectionist, so there were some issues with the quality of the vinyl. We have found some good stuff now, and they're cranking away. So
Okay, well, it's okay to make more than one. So these are not all going to be individual box sets that are bespoke, are they? So
well, actually, the first guy who bought some, he did get an individually bespoke set with some extras thrown in, but no, they will not. They will not. So we're gonna get cracking on them here soon. I'm told while I'm gone this weekend because I'm a distraction. I don't know what she's talking about. I think I'm great. So I don't know.
Just ask him; he'll tell you.
Exactly right.
All right. Watcher, what's new with you? Anything for the good in the Commonwealth here?
Not at present. Just keep your head on a swivel. Don't do anything stupid. That's please don't let it be one of our people.
Yeah. So I'd like to say thank you to everybody who's in the viewing audience, in the chat, and what have you, and you're going to see some updates as it relates to our transition to Twitter. I need to put my head together with Watcher over the weekend on that, but I do want to do that because I think that frees us up a little bit, at least for a while, and we'll see how that goes. And I am supposed to be in California next week, which will be the event around which we're planning to do the quantum computing discussion. I have a couple things I need to pin down tomorrow and Friday to be able to make that announcement official. But I think you're gonna like that show when we get it done. It's mind-boggling in so many ways. And so otherwise, we'll see you next Wednesday, and one way or the other, and we'll have a little bit more information about some of the things that we're going to do with the Privy Council, both as it relates to a merchandising perspective, a little bit of a shift in some of the aspects of what we do on Twitter, and a little bit of a different take on what we're doing on Substack, which has not been much, and that's my fault. And what that is going to do in the way of benefiting a key cause that I'm very, very passionate about and have been investing some time and effort into, and that is creating an entity that becomes the voice of the fentanyl resistance. How do we push back on both enemies, foreign and domestic, as it relates to the fentanyl crisis in the United States? Because I just think I don't know how you can take a country seriously in the context of ignoring something like fentanyl and then ignoring one of the root causes, which is the absence of control of the southern border. And those two things are near and dear to my heart. So that's kind of where we're headed with all of this. It'll become in clearer focus as we continue to talk about it. But in the meantime, thank you very much for paying attention, or not, or at least acting like you're paying attention to what we're saying, because we benefit from that greatly. And I hope you take away some things that make you think and and make you a better citizen as a result of listening to us babble about these things. So have a great evening. Watcher, take us out, please.